Today I'm going to talk about political translation. And of course, when we talk about political translation, we are talking about translating for newspapers or for news bulletin, which is going to appear for TV or radio, or even on the internet on a platform where there is some news or piece of news. Now, of course, media reports about political events are always form of they have the form of being recontextualized, and any recontextualization, if you like, involves transformation. It needs to be transformed. This recontextualization. Now, what does that mean? I mean, what is recontextualization in the first place? Before we go into that, we need to know when we are reading any piece of news, any item of news, it will be either a news report, which the correspondent usually reads or says in front of the camera, or in the written form in a newspaper. It can be either a news report or it can be an opinion, of course, which is reporting on, let's say, a speech or an interview with a very famous political figure, and they are trying to report that. Of course, the problem is in translation here is that you are going to have the original speech as a reporter, but of course you have to translate it if it's in a foreign language. And this is something that the newspapers will not tell you. They don't tell you that this piece of news is actually a translation. Let's say, for example, you're reading in a newspaper about an article which is written originally, or about a speech that's spoken by the German Chancellor, Vice Chancellor Merkel, for example. Now, how can it be that Merkel is saying something in English in a speech representing her own country, which is German? I mean, she's speaking in German, yet the English newspaper is reporting it in English. Now, here, of course, there is translation involved, definitely, because it's this translation is from German to English. But, of course, because it's a report, it's not going to actually translate the whole speech and publish the whole speech in the report. It will be just taking some quotes, either direct quotes or indirect quotes from the speech. And these direct quotes or even indirect quotes are actually taken from a translation, which has been, in other words, the speech has been translated in the first place, before it is to be edited down or written in a form of a report. And that is really one of the issues, is that they don't mention the translation at all. They say the French president is saying blah, blah, blah. And you just think, well, does the French president speak English at the time, or is it the translation? In most cases, the French president will be speaking in French, and then the newspaper, let's say an American or British or English-speaking newspaper, will be quoting what the French Sarkozy or whoever is actually speaking in French. So they have to translate what he has said, and also take these quotations and rearrange them in the report. So this kind of rearrangement, sometimes they might actually take certain things from that context and change it to a specific, because the report will have in mind a specific angle from which or through which the reporter is trying to actually put forward to the public. Now, the other point about recontextualization here is that it's not only adding, deleting sometimes, rearranging, sometimes reformulating the text in the target text, without telling us that there is translation. Of course, there is translation there. And not only that, it's not only reporting what's in the interview, for example, or what's in the speech. There is also another element, which is evaluation by the reporter or the person who's reporting that kind of piece of news item. So there is not only just what's happened or what the presidents, let's say, of France or Belgium has said, but also there is some sort of rearranging that event and taking some parts of these, some direct quotes and indirect quotes from the what's spoken by the Belgian or the Belgian, let's say, Prime Minister or any other politician in a foreign country. So you see, they are quoting them, and they said this. And of course, they are not telling us that they said this in a Dutch language, and we have translated into English, and we're telling you now what they are saying in English. This is not there. So in actual fact, the translation itself is hidden. It's not stated in the report that we have translated the speech first before we have actually used it in our report. And they are being selective in the way they select the parts of the actual speech for a specific purpose. And also they have in mind who are the readers, the readership is very, very important, and the readership expectations, of course, when the reporter is writing for, let's say, The Guardian or for any English newspaper about a foreign event or a foreign speech or a foreign interview, an interview with a foreign character or personality. Now, the other point, which is in the political translation for translators to be aware of, this is extremely important, is the political topics that are used, or the various topics that are used in the newspaper or in politics, whether it's politics or non-politics. There are obituaries, people who have died, they write about them in one section, for example. There's sports reports. There are also horoscopes, advertisements. There are also weather reports, what's happening in the weather, horoscopes for people who are interested in astrology. But the main topics that are in newspapers are political. They are all politics about what's happening in one country or another country, and the relations between two countries. So the majority of the topics in the newspaper or in the media will be political. And of course, being aware, for example, if it's a speech and you are actually reporting it as a report, writing it as a report, not as a speech. So you're changing also the genre of in the way you are reporting. Now, this is one thing. The other point, just going back to the readership expectations, of course, if the media report is actually published in a quality paper, in other words, a serious paper, and this serious paper is broadsheet, of course, what's called broadsheet, and broadsheet papers are papers that are what's called highbrow, for highbrow audience. People who are educated they read this kind of print or this kind of news from official newspapers. Whereas tabloids, which are little papers, which are less serious, shall we say, papers where all the topics they talk about are not as seriously dealt with as the broadsheet or the quality paper. So we need to be aware when we are translating from one newspaper or from a source, which is a newspaper, a print or a magazine or whatever, we need to be aware what kind of source is it. Is it a quality paper or is it a tabloid? We're less serious. Another element in political translation with regards to texts that are taken from newspapers or from newspapers in particular, again also within TV and radio, is that there are what's called editorials. Now, editorials means they are using an opinion. So therefore, when we are translating, we need to be aware that he is expressing an opinion, the reporter or the writer of that editorial, the editor. The editor will be not only reporting what's the information that's happened in that, for example, interview or in that speech. No, they are actually writing their own opinion, which will mean that they will mention some of the information about that particular interview or that particular speech, but they will not mention the whole speech. And they will be giving the readers the idea that you have read the speech, you have heard the speech before, and now I'm going to comment on it. So in other words, the editorial is a commentary on the on the speech or on the interview that's done by a foreign dignitary. So that's really another element where you are to be aware of. Now, of course, in newspapers and in the media, there is some sort of communication going on, human interaction going on through linguistic interaction. And that linguistic interaction we have to be aware of, as Lefebvre have mentioned before, about the ideological element involved in this and the status factor as well. So the ideological element, in other words, there is a kind of an ideology being given from the actual speech or interview, and also there is after the translation or through the process of translation, that kind of ideological elements or is there as well. So we need to be aware of that, because it's embedded really in the language. What's embedded in the language is a socio-cultural and ideological, historical, even institutional conditions that are there in the text, which we need to be aware of as when we are translating political translation. The ideology, we want to know if this person, for example, is taking a left side view or right side. He's a rightist or a leftist in terms of their attitude, their politics. So we need to be aware of their ideology, whether that ideology is of a religious aspect, it has a religious nature, or if it is political nature as well. So we need to know what kind of ideology is being, he's trying to drive at, and that will be embedded or determined by the conditions, by these ideological, historical, sociocultural, and institutional ones as well. Now, another element when we are translating political texts or political discourse, shall we say, is that we are looking at who are the parties, who are or the players or the characters in the story. They are mainly those who are representing the state, of course, or certain states. Perhaps it's one country, a dignitary from this country or that country, a VIP who's speaking on behalf of their own country. And then, of course, when we are translating, we are giving it to another, let's say, home government or home country or readers who will be reading about it. Let's say if it's in English and we are translating into Arabic, of course, it will be important, especially if it's going to be like the political translation is going to appear in, let's say, the website, okay? And the website, which is a domestic website, and you are reporting on a foreign event by a foreign dignitary or a VIP. Now here, of course, you are to be aware of what are the important elements in this report that are of interest to the readers in your home country where they are reading this story. So you are taking a story from a foreign country and bringing it home to your own country, which is the target language. And that is what you are doing here. You need to be aware of that kind of thing here. And that is also another form of recontextualization happening there, which you need to be aware of and you need to consider and take. Of course, the communication here is political communication. You are communicating politics through the media, and you are telling us what is what's happening. With regards to the ideology again, of course, if in dictatorial kind of societies, the text can be prevented from being accessible to the public if these texts are not in line with some official ideology of the ruling political party, let's say in a country like Iraq or whichever. So I'm not implying here that Iraq is a dictatorial or non-dictatorial country, but what I'm saying is that sometimes if it's a dictatorial society, then some of the texts may not be available or may be prevented from being accessible to the public if the ideology of a certain political party, ruling party, is deciding that this is not in line with their official ideology. And that is another issue when you are translating. So they might actually delete some or part of it in the report. So, I mean, the main, the state and the public, and of course the media is there, and the printed media is there to put forward what's happening. Of course, when you are translating, you need to know something about the lexical features, the syntactic features when you're translating, and the stylistic features here. All of these are all very important and to be aware of when you are translating, and see on the choice of words and what the implications of these words. For example, the word loathe and hate are quite different, because loathe is much more, much stronger than the word hate, for example, or love and like. So these are elements of word choice that are to be aware of and you need to know about. And when you are processing, I mean, it's according to Van Dyck, 1988, he says in his analysis of text processing in news production, he says that he has actually listed certain operations that happen, that are central and that happen in the production. He has mentioned the selection, and then reproduction, summarization, local transformation, and the stylistic and the rhetorical element or formation. So these are very, very important. And then also, as I said earlier about recontextualization, there are recontextualization strategies according to Blackledge, which is 2005, where he says that they involve addition, deletion, rearrangement, and substitution. And that's what he has identified as the procedures for reproducing the news item in another, to introduce this news item. But if you are translating it, you need to be aware of all these procedures that are happening there, so that you can actually then know how to handle it in the target language. Many of these reports about foreign events and foreign political events, topical ones, that are mentioned in editorials, of course, are not really they are in the editorials, they are pushed in terms of the events themselves, they are pushed in the background. They are information, but in the background. Because in the editorial, you're talking about opinions. And the opinion is, they mention what's happened a little bit, and then they give their own opinion and evaluate the event itself. And that's what's happening in editorials. So we need to be aware when we're translating editorials, it's going to be quite different from when translating reports. And when we are translating reports, we need to be aware that these reports, if they are from a foreign country, these reports, when they are reporting about a speech or an interview or a briefing, press briefing, these reports will have direct quotations and indirect quotations that are translated, but they're not going to tell you that they are translated, even though, for example, the foreign dignitary is, let's say, from China or from Russia or from whichever country, Greece or Turkey or another foreign country. So this kind of awareness of the different structure, if you like, between the editorial and the report is absolutely essential and vital, because the editorial will push away the background information, provides a little bit, not push away, but actually provides more information, background information, and less about the facts that happened in the actual interview or in the actual speech. So not all the facts will be presented in the editorial. More of the facts will be mentioned in the report, but not in the editorial. Okay? And these are also important to be aware of. And when they are recontextualizing, they filter, and this is very, very important. When they recontextualize, this involves filtering, as Blackledge is saying in 2005. He says it's the filtering of some meaning potentials of the discourse. In other words, they are trying to give you interpretations and trying to explain certain things about that political event. So you need to be aware of what the statements are saying and what is being interpreted by the editor in his editorial.